Hey, I know what you want, and I got what you need. Infinity Knives and Brian Ennals, a city drowned in God's black tears.
Whoa. Hello one, hello all, it's the gothiest ghost of them all, Casper in the Flesh, and it's time for a review of Infinity Knives and Brian Ennals, A City Drowned in God's Black Tears. This is a collaboration album between Maryland producer Infinity Knives and Maryland MC Brian Ennals, and this is a duo who I've just this year familiarized myself with, and going back into their back catalog, they've always been experimental, but experimental in a sense where they've dabbled in the vintage side of things, such as synth funk, but never really stopped there. And when I say never really stopped there, I mean going into a plethora of influences, not just being an experimental project based off of white noise, digicore. Not that there's anything wrong with that. You know, I've loved and still love death grips, clipping, but they certainly bring something different this time around, something very standout, and more digging into the echelons of the 80s in a way. But not just stopping at synth funk, and this time around really bringing a blend into their arsenal. It's an experimental blend into their arsenal. And on this LP, I would say they've gotten even more experimental and more creative. And if I could describe Brian's flow, it's a very strong flow with a lot of rasp, a lot of grit to it, definitely a lot of aggression, a lot of definitely understandable aggression. And he has a very confrontational delivery. He could even go rudimentary at sometimes, going back into the golden age of hip hop. But also, this man has various flows. Like, he could adapt to any beat, and he's pretty much proven that on this record. And lyrically, he's so biting and fed the fuck up with a lot of injustices going around, whether it's police brutality, systemic racism, capitalism. Like, he does not hold his tongue, and lyrically he is so savage, he does not mince words whatsoever. Like, he is not what you would call a cerebral MC. This man just goes straight for the jugular. Very straightforward, with a lot of truth and a lot of ideological relatability. Like, for me, as like a white guy, I can't really identify with what he's saying, but however, that doesn't mean I can't understand the poignance of what he's saying, the importance of what he's saying. That doesn't mean I can't sympathize with somebody's shortcomings. That doesn't mean I can't sympathize with the oppression. But he mixes his frustrations, he mixes his very strong, needed criticisms with a dab of dark humor as well. And he does this in a very extreme but necessary way, saying how IDF is the new Nazis, Netanyahu's the new Hitler, aiming low because they're aiming at kids. Only immigrant I want deported is Elon Musk. High as fuck because I hate the ground. The death of one man is a tragedy, the death of a million is a statistic. And there are bars here where me, as a white man or content creator, probably shouldn't say, so I will just let you listen to this for yourself, so that way you can see what I mean, where I'm coming from, where they're coming from here. But there's also bars here that bring down idols, that bring down public figures or artists or celebrities who have passed on, who were put on a high platform on this plateau but brought down a few pegs for their problematic behavior or their demons that they faced. And in a way, I would compare that to JPEG Mafia. So while this artist may be beloved or respected, Brian really does bring a very humanizing element to this, a very humbling element to the people who we would admire for their skills or their artistry, or even sometimes pointing out artistic shortcomings, like how sometimes dudes are rap gods but can't make hits. and also addressing police brutality. Sometimes pigs beat your ass while you're still wearing cuffs, but also going into some horrorcore bars that are Eminem style level, maybe going beyond Eminem style level. And with these horrorcore bars, I would say there's certainly layers to what Brian is saying here. As Brian talks about removing the skin off Jack Harlow's face and using it to rob a Wells Fargo. But doing this, I would say he's in layers killing two birds with one stone, pointing out two criticisms here of white privilege, but also the generational wage gap. And while there isn't really a complexity to Brian's flow, like he's not really trying to rap your face off or go as fast as he can, his bars and his flows, his delivery is still very effective. It's still very precise. And it's very straightforward. It's very straight from the heart. And he definitely knows how to craft these tracks. But also, I love how Brian takes one subject matter on the surface, but within that subject matter takes that opportunity to dive deeper into another topic, another issue, like on Soft Pack Shorty. But on the surface, you think this thing is going to be a very lustful, ratchet, man-woman type banger where he's talking about this woman who he has immense love for, very tight sexual situation here, a lot of chemistry, somebody who he's 10 toes down for, but also uses this opportunity to discuss systemic racism, race inequality, and how the Trump administration has affected drastically in an adverse way people of color and their health care, and also how this woman has lost family members fatally due to COVID, and also how Medicaid won't pay for her therapy. So it really does go to show how Brian just can take one subject and dive deeper than you think it's gonna go. And on the track Iron Wall, you have essentially a retaliatory track, a very needed retaliatory track against the IDF, imperialism, but not stopping there, also addressing America and its disgusting, egregious history of its war crimes, its violence, the terrorism of America, Trump and his disgusting acts of sexual violence, the Patriot Act, the Iraq War, colonialism, how Twitter has become authoritarian, and how this country has forever been aiding and abetting a genocide. Where Brian on the second verse goes into graphic but necessary detail. Fatima was a dreamer, but then they blew her bones apart. She said, "Don't wear black at my funeral." She said, "Don't wear black at my funeral. Wear red just like my heart." They brought out an aid truck. People was running up. Of course, the IDF was shooting. They brought out an aid truck. Of course, the IDF started shooting. Genocide is American as apple pie. Baseball and mass shooting. Barbarians at the gate. IDF soldiers protesting the right to commit acts of rape. And just how disgusting and Nazi-like we've basically aligned ourselves as a country to be. And then you got the track Live at the Chinese Buffet, which is probably the most blunt, bleak, and brutally honest track here, with its subject matter of vitriol from the government, atheism, and hatred of life in general. And due to the fact that Brian's son resembles him very strongly, that he is going to genetically inherit his negative traits and make the same mistakes that he did. And how God was the villain this whole time, and how the garden was used purposely for deception so people could make mistakes and live to suffer. And in terms of deception, I think this correlates perfectly to the opening bar, as in Brian is speaking on the woman who accused and led to the very fatal and disgusting murder of a child, Emmett Till, based off of the lie that he whistled at her, which led to him being murdered and mutilated by racist white men. And the second verse really does do a genius correlation to capitalism and a pandemic, as it could turn into somebody who thrives and benefits off the suffering of others, or being the one who does suffer, or being the grifter, selling out, doing anything for profit as long as it benefits them, no matter who it hurts. And due to the problematic history of important names in hip hop, asking, can this really take the black community far? And the song Baggy deals in a tremendous amount of use of alcohol, drugs, but also, as I alluded to earlier, pointing out Kobe Bryant and his sex crimes. And some very pro-consent bars here. Like, I love the line saying, if she doesn't consent, she's not with it. Take your ass home, jerk off, and deal with it. There's also hypocritical and ideological holes that are poked into religion, too. And on the back end of this LP, I would say it ends pretty strong. Like, sometimes PAPI CHULO is a display of a bunch of continuous, unfortunate events and thoughts that run through your head in the course of your life, but saying in the end it doesn't matter because we're all going to leave this earth. And while the track Everyone I Love is depressed, it is the most funky and most groovy track here, but also the most dark and dismal, and honestly the most troubling of very depressive thoughts. And I would be remiss if I did not mention the fantastic interpolation of Tom's Diner on this track. Thoughts of wanting to leave this earth, but also having the fear of death as well, and also having people who you love, like, saying, don't take your life because we love you too much, so you feel like you need to live for them. And all this depression is due to being wronged by the system. But all this depression is due to being wronged by the system, being constantly lied to. Again, it's a very morbid track, but definitely the most groovy and colorful here, and honestly has probably the most hilarious outro on the whole record. And in terms of production here, it's very experimental, it's very unpredictable. Like on the title track, that starts off as this very haunting Spanish folk track with very, like, morbid, very dark lyrics, but then turns into this immense, crushing sludge metal track. And the song TREVOGA, which is translated into anxiety, but makes for the most gorgeous, most dreamiest track on the whole record, with this blend of trip hop, heavenly strings layered with piano and upright bass, with a stunning vocal performance from Vladlina. And I feel this track complements beautifully the flamenco and cumbia track to follow, sometimes PAPI CHULO. And while this is a very experimental political record, there's no denying that there is nothing short of catchy tracks here. There's nothing short of catchy hooks here. Like on the drumless but very 80s R&B synth Live at the Chinese Buffet, that has these very sour synth chords that give this thing a very sinister touch to it, but also contrast the beauty of the instrumental. But the back end has a very dusty vintage version of the track TREVOGA, and really does show that this record does have a very excellent flow to it. And the opener has a very frantic intro that has this rumbling drums and bass that sound very Death Grips-like, but takes on a very epic turn of grand, epic synths that just become more epic as the track continues. With rising synth layers, the whole thing sounds very anthemic. And the song Baggy has these sour, horror-themed synths that actually get more terrifying as the track continues. That has these warped synth hits with these bold, twittering metallics with an insane tribal breakdown. But the back end is very cinematic and beautiful and has a very gorgeous cycling outro. And the song Soft Pack Shorty, which is an absolute trap drill banger that I could honestly see Sexy Red on. I could see her, like, going sick on this, being completely unhinged. But this track here alone, I would say, definitely rivals anything any artist of this style would have hopped on. And the variety of this track in such a short amount of time is insane on this record and done so well. And the final track ends with a folk outro. And melodically, I do enjoy this, I just wish it was mixed way better, because the layered vocals are a bit too mushed together, and also The following passage, I feel, just kind of meanders a bit. But there's a lot of variety here, a lot of creativity here that I feel should not go unnoticed, and I definitely enjoy here. And lyrically, so biting, but necessarily so. Politics are definitely on point with dark humor mixed in. But honestly, I do wish this was longer, but that does not take away that this is a fire release. And after multiple listens, I can definitely say this is one of my favorite rap records of the year. And I don't think it's going to be for everybody, but honestly, if this isn't for you, then you're probably basic anyway. I'm sorry, it had to be said. But if you're willing to try something different, or if you're already familiar with this style of rap, please check it out. This will definitely be for you, because I really encourage you to give this a shot. Lyrically, instrumentally, fire record, great record. And in terms of subject matter, a very powerful record as well. I'm feeling a 4.5 out of 5 on this record. If you've given this a listen, what'd you think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? I want to give a big shout out to legendary producer and artist Brian Eno. I want to give a shout out to a modern day legend, of course, JPEG MAFIA, great rapper, great producer. And that's it. Be a subscriber, that would be fire. Caspa, Gothic Ghost, Infinity Knives, Brian Ennals, A City Drowned in God's Black Tears. Till we meet again.